For my homily this afternoon, I have to tip my hat to a priest. His name is Father John Ricardo. He's a priest of Detroit, Michigan. And the dominant image I use in this homily, I stole from him, so I don't want to steal it from him, unless giving him credit, from a podcast he does called You Were Born for This. So you can check that out. It's quite amazing. Okay. On June 6, 1944, 160,000 people landed on over a 50-mile stretch of beaches in Normandy, France. Who were they, and why did they come? Were they there to check out French culture and cuisine? Nope. Were they there to check out the beaches of France? No. Who were they, and why did they come? They were Allied soldiers. And they had come because of the growing dominance and now total dominance of Europe by Nazism. It was now shrouded in darkness. And these 160,000 Allied soldiers had landed their troops, and they had come to Europe to set it free. They had come to rescue Europe from the evil of Nazism. When you look at a nativity set, which we have right over here, the creche, and you see the baby Jesus in his manger, which was a feeding box for animals, we could ask ourselves, why is that baby in that manger? Why is he there? And the answer is very simple. That child, who is God, is there to rescue us. Now, what I mentioned on June 6, 1944, we know today as D-Day, is in the context of a wider story. One could go back to the ending of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles had largely crippled Germany. They were largely blamed for World War I. They were bitter about that. That bitterness grew. Then in 1933, a man named Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, and his party, the National Socialist Party, the Nazis, began to rise in power in Germany. We can think about the German military. They did what's called blitzkrieg, lightning attack. They would send in the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, would mow people down. Then they would send in the German Panzer tank, the fastest tank the world had ever seen, and they rolled over Europe, defeating other countries until they had almost total dominance over all of Europe. And then in the midst of that darkness, on June 6th, 1944, D-Day, 160,000 soldiers had landed to rescue Europe. Christmas is in the context of a wider story, that God has created everything good, that the inner life between God is so great that out of the overflow of this, all of creation was created. And then God calls everything good. But we, created in God's image and likeness, we were created to share in God's own divine life. We are made in his very image and likeness. But our first parents, Adam and Eve, they fell away from God. They tried to be like God, but without God. And then we have the terrible consequences of that rejection of God. The fall begins to seep out into all generations. And God begins a rescue mission. He calls patriarchs. He makes covenants with them. He calls prophets to call his people back when they fall away. He starts a rescue mission. He gathers a people called Israel, the Jewish people. And he says, through them, he will be a light to all the nations. That they were not supposed to be for themselves. They were to be for the world. And through them, God would unify. He would call everyone back to himself. The problem is they weren't faithful. They kept falling away from God. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what do you do when the rescuers need rescuing? But there was a promise. There was a prophecy throughout all of the Old Testament that one day God himself would fix the problem. That God would send a Messiah, an anointed one, and he would fix it, and he would work it out, and he would gather everyone back to himself. That's the context of the wider story. What has he come to rescue us from? God has come to rescue us from sin and death. You know, you're all wearing masks to keep COVID out. There's a problem out there, and it's very small, and I'm trying to keep it from getting inside of my body. But the fundamental problem of human beings is actually on the inside of them. It's in their hearts. That we, through sin, find ourselves drawn to things that are not good for us. We can be prideful and lustful and greedy and envious and jealous and bitter and unforgiving and devious and deceptive. We can hurt people with our words. We can be like that. And we find ourselves so easily addicted to things, to our phone, to dark places on the internet, to what other people think about me, to shopping, to gambling, to frivolity, stupidity. I can be drawn and addicted to these terrible things. And I feel in that I wish I were free from it. I don't like this. I don't like wasting time. I don't like doing this. I wish I could stop doing it. But I can't on some deep fundamental level. And that power over you is what's called sin. St. Paul says it's a malevolent force that rules over the world. And the second thing God came to save us from is death. Some years ago, a very good friend of mine, his mother was dying. And I was with him along with a small group of people in the room in which she was in hospice. And you could see that her life was beginning to ebb out of her body. She kind of had a kind of labored breathing. And a friend of my friends was also there. I didn't know him. And he had his young son with him, about 10 years old. And he was noticing this woman dying. And he sort of brought it up. He said, "What's happening?" And his dad said, "Well, she's dying." And his face was like racked. It was with consternation and pain and confusion. He was disturbed by what he was seeing. And he just said out loud, "I don't like this." And his dad said, kind of matter-of-factly, dismissively, "It's part of life, son. It's part of life." 5 minutes later, this reality, this woman dying in our midst, got brought up again. The son said again, just like the first time, "I don't like this." His dad said again, kind of matter-of-factly, dismissively, "It's part of life, son." And I remember sitting in this room watching this scene and thinking, I'm with the kid. The kid's right. That's the proper response to death. It's disturbing. It's overwhelming. We feel powerless before it. So much pain, consternation. Oh, how could this be happening to somebody I love? What binds us together is going to be broken. All of us will die. That's how our lives will end. And St. Paul says that these two things, sin and death, have power over us. This kingdom of darkness rules over us. And the only way we can be saved is if someone invades it from the outside, and that this person brings light. Now, can you imagine being French, being under Nazi occupation, and reading the paper on June 7th, 1944, the day after D-Day, and your friend saying, anything interesting in the paper that happened yesterday? Stock market looks about the same. Croissants went up in price. And 160,000 soldiers landed yesterday in Normandy, France. Think about hearing that news. Think about the electric power of that proclamation, that you would go to every person you knew who was French, and you would say, someone's here. They've landed. 160,000 soldiers, not far from us, and they've come to liberate us. They've come to set us free. We're going to get out of this. We will have victory one day. And victory comes later. VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, doesn't come until May 8th of 1945, but on June 6th, 1944, they knew that someone had come to rescue them. And friends, the electric power of that proclamation on June 7th, 1944, should remind us, should be called to mind when we hear the proclamation of the angel to the shepherds in today's gospel. Do not be afraid, for today I announce to you good news of great joy that will be for all people. Today, in the city of David, a Savior has been born, who is Christ and Lord. And this will be the sign for you. You will find an infant laid in a manger and wrapped in swaddling clothes. The power of that proclamation, the darkness that had ruled the world, what the angel is saying is, someone has invaded it. Someone bringing light. Someone has landed. And he's here to rescue you. And who is he? He is Christ and Lord. He's the Christ. He's the anointed one. He's the Mashiach. He's the Messiah. He's the one we've been waiting for. He's the one that God promised he would send to fix the problem himself. But he's also Lord. The Greek word is Kyrios, so we say Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. It's the word that Jews used for the Lord, for God. He's not just a really special guy. He's not just a great prophet. He's actually God in the flesh. That's who's come to save us. That's who the Messiah is. That in Jesus, divinity and humanity, heaven and earth, have come together in his person. And the king has landed in this kingdom of darkness, the one who is the light of the nations. But he's come disguised. He snuck in behind enemy lines. He's clandestinely landed. And he's a little baby placed in a manger and wrapped in swaddling clothes. Why is he here? What does he come to do? He's Emmanuel. He's God with us. And his name is Jesus, which means God saves. And he's come to save his people from sin and death. Friends, this rescuing love came to save you from sin and death. This is the good news of the gospel, the good news of Christmas, that the degrading and humiliating slavery of sin can be set free. We can be broken through God's grace. We just heard the prophet Isaiah say this: the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Upon those who dwelt in gloom, a light has shone. In the letter to Titus, it says, "Beloved, the grace of God has appeared, saving all." Jesus has come to save all of us. And by his death on the cross and his resurrection, that's his victory over sin and death. But at Christmas, he's landed. The troops are here, and they've come to save us. Is God's rescuing love a reality in your life? Have you experienced the power of Jesus that flows through his sacraments? That I experience in confession, I taste a mercy that's stronger than all of my sin, worse than any darkness of my life, and he works greater than any dark desire in my life. There's a light that darkness cannot overcome. That in Jesus, I experience a love that's greater than even death itself. That I can look at a loved one dying and know in faith, this is not the last word of this story. This is not the last chapter. There is a love greater than this death, and it is Jesus who has come to rescue us. Is that a reality in your life and in my life? And I want to close by giving you a very simple admonition or encouragement. I think the most terrifying scripture in the whole Bible is there was no room for them in the inn. Because Jesus came to rescue us. He was born in a manger, which is really good news because we can be mangy people. All he needs is room. That's all he needs. All he needs is a yes. You just have to make room for him, for his rescuing love to come get you, to come save you. And I recommend you do one of these three things today and throughout this Christmas season. Number one, tell the Lord thank you. Just tell him thank you. French women would kiss soldiers when they saw them. These are the people that liberated us. We're so grateful. Friends, only Jesus could save us from sin and death, and he has done it. Tell the Lord thank you for doing for me what I could never do for myself. Number two, tell the Lord, please once again be the center of my life. I want to make more room for you this year than I ever have in my life. I want your rescuing love to be more of a reality. I want to be more free from sin than I ever have been in my life this year. I want to be so unafraid of death because of your love for me. Tell the Lord, please come into my heart once again, be the center. And lastly, tell the Lord that you love him. That you love him. Because it's only in a relationship with him that you experience this freedom from sin and death. Christmas, God is here, and this child, he's come to rescue us. Merry Christmas.